so much for having me here. Let me see if I can get this to work. Let's see. Awesome. My aim with this presentation is to take everything that I've learned about building and growing online identities and to give that information to each of you. I'm going to be talking about PR, social media, thought leadership, and a lot of other areas as well. And about my background, like Justin had mentioned, former VentureBeat writer, I raised funding for about 4 startups in Silicon Valley. My company's right now, we have a team of about 80 people, and write for publications like TechCrunch, et cetera, some others. And I wanted to mention, in this presentation, I want to talk about a lot of these kind of high principles that I've learned, but I also want to use very specific examples as well. So in this presentation, I'm happy to send it to everyone as well after. It actually includes these exact emails that I've seen be really effective and work. And I actually want to take everyone back to when I was first starting off. I'd raised funding when I was 19 in Silicon Valley for a startup, and I would see a lot of my friends who were founders, and they were building these startups and seeing their online reputations continue to grow. And I couldn't understand how they were able to do that. And just to tell you how bad I was at this is a photo of Eric Schoenfeld. He was the editor of TechCrunch at the time. And TechCrunch has this very large, important brand. And I remember meeting him in an elevator. And I was so nervous around him. I told him he was a tech celebrity, and I just ran out of the elevator, and he gave me this really weird look, right? So I was basically rock bottom at that point. And it was basically at that time that I looked to try to say, how do people build and grow their online profiles, their online brands, whether it's at an individual level or whether it's their company themselves? Is there a process that you can deconstruct? And the process that I've been able to figure out, that's what I'm going to explain in this presentation. And it's something each of you can do by yourselves, for yourselves as individuals, also for the companies or the organizations you're a part of. I also want to mention everything that I talk about here, it's applicable whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you're a consultant, or whether you work for the government. You can use this information. Okay, so I'm going to start with PR and the process that I figured out with that. And it's actually a 6-step process, and it has an acronym, which is called FAMOUS. So everyone in this room is not going to be able to forget this, okay? And I was thinking about what is the best way for me to kind of express and explain this 6-step process. And I want to use an example. And the example I use is called Espacio. It was actually a co-working space that I started. And the reason I use this example is that when you think about it, co-working spaces, they're actually at their core not very exciting businesses. Like you're renting office space, right? And every single week, there are many co-working spaces founded everywhere around the world. There shouldn't be a lot of people who should want to pay attention to this. And yet, we were on TechCrunch, the BBC, many of these large publications. And I want to explain what we did. I want to show you the emails that we used. And the idea is that each of you could basically use this as a template for either yourselves or whether it's the government or these organizations that each of you are a part of. All right, so let's get started. The first step in this is called formulate. And the idea is that whenever you do contact, let's say, a media influencer, let's say it's TechCrunch or the New York Times, it's important that you have something to announce to them. When I was a writer at the tech publication VentureBeat in New York, a lot of my friends would come up to me. They'd either say, hey, I personally, or my company, we see that when VentureBeat writes about people, it grows their online profile. Can you write about myself or my company? And I would say, sure, what do you have to announce? And they would say, well, we don't have anything to announce. And I would say, well, if you don't have anything to announce, then I can't write anything because there's no story there. So they would usually ask me, they'd say, well, if I'm a company in Aruba or an individual in Aruba starting this, what can I announce? And I would say in general, and this applies again to whether you're a startup or a government, you're going to have certain announcements throughout the year. Let's say you're launching a new program, or a new startup, a new product, a version 2.0. Maybe you raise a small amount of funding, or you sign on a big new partner. These are great announcements that you should contact the media about. So as opposed to contacting, let's say, TechCrunch or Wall Street Journal and saying, my name is, I'm an entrepreneur from Aruba, would you be able to write about my company? What you should say is, my company is going to make this announcement. Would you like to cover that announcement? And one of the things you'll find, most people don't realize this, but every single day when you look online and you read articles, the titles of those articles are actually the announcement that you make. So I'll show you right here. The article in this is co-working space launches. The announcement we made to them was a launch. And so the first step, formulate. Whenever you do contact, whether it's an influencer, whether it's media, et cetera, to grow your online identity, make sure that you have something to announce. All right, second step. This is very important, the second step, amplify. So most companies, especially when you're starting off, actually don't have anything that's particularly exciting when you think about it, because most entrepreneurs, maybe you have 2 or 3 people in a part of your company. You have limited resources. And similar to how I mentioned co-working space isn't particularly exciting venture. But what is exciting is where each of you, again, whether you're part of the government, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a consultant, where you want to take your company the next 3, 4, 5 years. So what I always like to tell people is, do you know that feeling when you're about to go to bed or you're in the gym and you're like daydreaming about like, wow, in like 3 years, my company's going to have like 300 employees. We're going to be taking over the world, right? Can I get a nod of heads? Do you guys all know that feeling right there? All right, well, whatever vision you see there, that's what you should express, whether it's contacting the media or whether it's contacting these influencers, because that makes for a really interesting story. And the example I like to use is with Espacio. We didn't say to someone, hey, we're going to launch this company because we want to rent office space. What we said was we want to launch this co-working space because we want to turn the city of Medellin into the Silicon Valley of Latin America. That was the exciting vision and dream that we had. And I can essentially guarantee that each of you has those exciting dreams and ideas as well, and that's what you should express. Some questions you could ask yourself is, whether you're a part of a government or an entrepreneur, what is your company going to look like in 3 years when it has, let's say, it's worth $100 million, or you have 100 plus employees helping you? What are those big kind of missions? All right, the third step I call messaging. And the idea is once you have these ideas, how do you basically kind of communicate them to influencers so they can write about you and cover yourself, cover your company to grow your identity? And you basically need a press release and an email pitch. And I know many people might hear those words often, and I kind of want to explain the purpose of each of them. The role of a press release is not to sell an influencer or a journalist on why they should cover your story. The role of the press release is that once somebody is interested in writing about you, to make it as easy for them to do so as possible. And I want to explain why. So in this presentation, I want to try to give as many secrets as I can to everyone. And a lot of times when I ask different audiences, I say, hey, if you think about these journalists, these influencers living in Silicon Valley, living in San Francisco, New York, these are the most expensive cities in the world. How much do you think many of them get paid for every article that they author? Again, the most expensive cities in the world. And most of the time, what people will say to me is, I think those people make $100 an article or $500 an article, right? Usually hear those type of numbers, those guesses. And what I tell them is many of the world's leading publications, the largest ones, and this is a secret, many of them pay their writers $20 an article. And I want to let that sink in. Because when you think about it, if you live in San Francisco or New York and you're being paid that per article, what that means is you have to produce a ton of articles, right? There's a ton of pressure there. So if you as an entrepreneur or a member of the government know that ahead of time, what you could say is, I know that when you see my email, you're going to know whether that article is going to take 20 minutes or 5 hours to write. And you're going to be more likely to write about something that takes less time. So I'm actually going to do all that work ahead of time, put it into a press release, put it in an email to make your life as easy as possible. That's the role of the press release. The role of any email pitch you do, they tend to be about 200 words long, is to basically sell an influencer or a journalist on why they should write about your company. And I just like to point out 4 things. The first is to lead with social proof. I call type 1 something really, really impressive about yourself. Maybe you're a Harvard MBA, maybe you graduated from Y Combinator, you're an engineer from Google. Now the other end of the spectrum is type 2 social proof. Maybe you're a 15-year-old developer, or you're a 65-year-old founder, or you used to be homeless, or you used to be a sports star. The other day, this This entrepreneur wrote me, he said, I'm a 15-year-old founder from Australia. No one from TechCrunch will ever want to write about me. I'm only 15 years old. And I said, no, you don't understand. That's why they will want to write about you. There are not many people who are 15-year-olds who write TechCrunch every single day. Other things to think about are whoever you contact, include links to your social profiles. That could be LinkedIn, that could be Twitter, etc. These are really important because unfortunately, again, whether you're contacting influencers or the media, there are a lot of fake stories going around. And when you include links to your social profiles, you're basically saying, hey, I'm putting my name behind this story. Whoever you contact, address by name. And the last point, another secret that a lot of people don't know, I remember writing at VentureBeat, about half the stories that we wrote about every day were sent to tips@venturebeat.com. So those emails are read. I mentioned this press release. They follow a very specific format. Use data whenever possible. I have a list of this list of example press releases that people can use as a template here. Again, after, I'm happy to send this presentation to anyone here. Okay, the fourth step with outreach. And again, this is when you're contacting, this isn't just tech media I'm referring to. This could be People Magazine. This could be an influencer in Los Angeles, etc. I remember going back to the co-working space example. I sent an email, we got published on TechCrunch, and I sent this email to a reporter from the Next Web, large media publication, and said, would you like to cover this announcement about our launch? And she said, hey, you know what, TechCrunch, they already covered us about 2 days ago. We saw that story, it's already old news. Just let us know when you have your next announcement. And all of you, again, whether you're part of the founders or government or consultant, will come across this issue, which is that many of these large organizations, or even influencers, they build their reputations by breaking news stories. And once somebody does this, others will be less likely to cover it, right? So how do you kind of overcome that? There are basically two solutions. The first is called an exclusive. With an exclusive, you email somebody and you say, do you want first right to publish this? And that's very appealing to a lot of people. It's a way that you can kind of break out from the crowd. The second is to use an embargo. And the idea with the embargo is you'd email, let's say, 15 different influencers and publications and say, my company from Aruba, we're going to make this announcement next Wednesday, 12 o'clock New York time. If you would like to cover this, we're going to send you all the information we have. And many of you might not know this, but you experience embargoes every single day. So sometimes you might see like the government or let's say a big company will make an announcement at 1 o'clock. And then like at 1:01, like all the big networks and newspapers will all have articles about this. And when you think about it, it's like, how is it possible that within 60 seconds of this announcement coming out that all these articles were already published? And the answer is that all these organizations were given the information ahead of time. They just agreed to an embargo not to publish it until that time. Just something to keep in mind with exclusive versus the embargo. Next, the U in the famous acronym is unrelenting. The idea is whoever you want to write about you to grow your online identity, make sure to contact them. And presume that if you do not contact them, that they won't be writing about you, sharing about you on social media, etc. So if you have that mentality, it'll force you to be proactive. This is actually a list. We spent about 100 hours creating a free list. This is specific to tech with different emails and contact information, and any one of you can use that. The last step in the famous acronym is strategize. So each of you on a personal level, and also for your companies as well, can actually look out the next 6 months or so and see, hey, do we have any particular announcements to make, whether it's launching a new product or funding, or maybe a new client, whatever it may be. I've found that the most successful companies look to make announcements every 8 to 12 weeks. All right, this right here might be the most important slide that I showed today, okay? And I want to give you a story. And before I go to social media, et cetera, I want to keep talking. I want to finish this with PR. And many things I saw at VentureBeat, let me start by saying most people, when I would talk to about the media, they always say the same thing. They say, you know what? If I want to be on the New York Times, I need to be good friends with the editor or the journalist, right? Can I get a nod of heads? Have you guys always heard that over and over again? And I found that actually wasn't true. So after leaving VentureBeat, I said, you know what, I want to prove that this isn't true. So I remember I got a call from this company. The founder's name is Mark Snow. He's about 65 years old. He lives in the middle of the country. He said, Conrad, I don't know anyone, right? I don't know any journalists. I don't know anyone in tech. Can you help me with my company? This is the company safely filed. And I said, sure, I'm going to help, but on one condition, okay? Nobody can know that I'm involved. When I email people, I'm going to say, hi, my name is Mark Snow, right? His name is mark.s.snow at safe. He created a fake email just for me, right? So I followed the exact process, the 6 steps that I just showed you, right? I formulated the announcement, I amplified it, made it more interesting, put in a press release and email, I sent it off. And I woke up the next morning, and I'm super nervous. Because specifically for PR, what I just showed you, I wanted to know, hey, is this process actually going to work, or is it just about the relationship, right? So I'm super nervous, about to go to my computer, and I open up my email, and I don't have any responses, right? And I'm like, oh, this is just terrible. I'm like, I'm depressed right now. Maybe everything I just showed you right there just doesn't work at all, okay? But I said, wait, I need 24 more hours to see if this actually works. Is it about the process or is it about the relationship? So I go to bed, wake up the next morning, and I'm super nervous, right? Again, about to check this email, wondering like, is what I just shared with you actually gonna work? And I check my email, and there are no responses from the media. I haven't heard from anyone, okay? And at this point, I'm just like, I'm just so depressed. I'm like, this is just terrible, the worst, right? No one had responded. And then suddenly I get this phone call. It's the founder Mark. And he says, Conrad, you've been doing such a great job. So many media and all these influencers have written about us. And I said, what are you? And I said, I've been emailing as this fake email address that he set up for me, but I'm checking my own personal email. So I go and check, and here's some of the articles, right? That's actually a photo of him on VentureBeat. VentureBeat had covered the Next Web. Many of these influencers had, right? Their online identity had dramatically grown. And everyone came up to me. They said, Conrad, of course you got him on VentureBeat. You used to write there. You're friends with these journalists. I said, no, you do not understand. When I contacted these people, I said, my name is Mark Snow. No one knew that I was involved, right? And I wanted to take it a step further. So one of the things I tested, we put people in kind of tiers based on the company design, their company mission, et cetera. And we tested this out over many data points to say, sometimes I would email as myself, or we'd email as a client, or just a random member of my team. And what I found was that the results were almost the same across the board. If you followed the right process, what I just explained to everyone, you can, again, be featured on the largest media, the largest influencers can cover you, and it doesn't matter whether you're an entrepreneur just starting off in Aruba, whether you're in Silicon Valley, New York, whatever it may be. And this works very well for government and larger organizations as well. Okay, the second point, thought leadership and identity. And I find this to be one of the most effective strategies for building your identity online. I mentioned before in the last step, the S in famous, that to me the most successful companies make announcements every 8 to 12 weeks. And when you think about it, that actually leaves this kind of down period in between about, hey, you want to kind of stay visible, you want your identity to grow online, how can you go about doing that? So with the co-working space, one of the thoughts I had was, hey, what if we publish an article not about why this co-working space is great, but about the tech ecosystem, right? That falls in line with our mission to grow the ecosystem of Medellin and Colombia. So I sent an email to TechCrunch, and I didn't know the editor at the time. And this was actually the exact email I used. And again, I'm happy to share this PowerPoint after it for people to use this as a template. And basically what the email said is, I authored this article about the tech ecosystem, and I would love for it to be considered on TechCrunch. And they ended up publishing the article. And then, to me, that was basically a foot in the door. So in the future, for the second, third article, it came to the point where they know you, they're comfortable with you, and in many cases, people can receive either access to publish there, or you don't even need to necessarily pitch stories in the future. It's kind of your foot in the door. And I just want to mention this, again, because everyone here can use this. It's all a free strategy, and it's a very effective one. What most people tend to do is they send an email out to like a Business Insider or a large publication, and they say, I'm a founder, or I'm part of the government in Aruba. Could I write an article for your publication? And they'll say, the editor gets worried because they say, hey, I don't really know this person. If I say yes and the article's not very good, I'm kind of pressured to have to publish it, right? So I'm just not going to respond. So what happens to most people is they say, you know what, I just emailed 10 big publications and newspapers and like no one responded, right? And what I always recommend is the first email that you send, similar to this one here, actually attach the article to the email. And in many cases, what they'll say is, hey, this is actually a really good article, and we'd love to publish it. And that's basically your foot in the door to building this long-term relationship with the person. And again, you know what, a couple weeks ago, I was in New York City grabbing coffee with one of the editors from Entrepreneur Magazine. And the editor was much more proactive with me about saying, hey, do you know people who would be really good contributors? So again, a lot of these large influential organizations are looking for this, and it will dramatically grow your online identity as well. Something to keep in mind. Okay, I want to touch about social media and identity. And I thought about kind of explaining, maybe going into these, I think a lot of people hear a lot of advice about social media. So I wanted to talk about kind of these individual secrets I found to be most effective. One, many of you, for example, use, let's say, LinkedIn, right? How can you use LinkedIn most effectively? Well, one of the things I found is, especially as LinkedIn, more and more people get on there, more and more people post, there's just a lot more noise. But LinkedIn has created a very specific algorithm. And one of the things I found is when you add something, let's say periodically add, let's say, work experience, this will be broadcasted to your entire audience and will kind of grow your profile. So the reason I mention this, there are many of you, even in this room right now, that might, let's say, be mentors at Founder Institute, or they might be contributors at these newspapers, whatever it may be. And in many cases, what individuals will do is they'll list that as a volunteer experience. But because it's listed as volunteer experience, many people won't actually hear about it. As opposed to listing it as work experience, this is just one example, this will be kind of broadcasted out. And it's funny because especially as you grow your profile on LinkedIn, this does matter because you'll find these kind of old contacts reaching out to you for new opportunities that and the way they will have heard about it is via kind of these work experience and you being top of mind for a lot of these people. Facebook, two thoughts come to mind. I think according to a lot of different studies, I think posting any more than twice a day, you're going to see much more of a drop-off, whether it's via comments or engagement. I highly recommend looking to tag different individuals, et cetera, as much as possible to increase chances of sharing. Product Hunt. Do you guys all know what Product Hunt is? It's a popular platform for posting different products and different organizations online. The way it works is basically like a Reddit or a Dig, where people on the homepage can upvote themselves, can get posted there, and people upvote for kind of the top spot. What most people don't know is Product Hunt, if you are near the top on the homepage, if you're featured on the homepage, it can bring you as many visits as something like a TechCrunch article. It really grows your online identity, kind of the visibility of your company as well. What most people don't know is probably 99% of people, if you go to Product Hunt and try to submit your product or your company, you either cannot do so, or if you do post it, it's actually not going to show up on the homepage. It's going to show up on this really random area that if you get enough upvotes, has the small possibility of being published on the homepage. So what I always recommend to people when you do look to be published on Product Hunt is actually to contact a moderator. And the moderator will actually, when they publish your post to Product Hunt, will directly hit the homepage, and your chances of reaching number one are probably 50x what it would be otherwise. I have a list of moderator emails. They're not too hard to find online, but if anyone emails, I can send them to you. Twitter, I do recommend using. I know it's less popular than the past, but people, especially from a business context, do expect individuals to have a profile there. There are a number of different ways you can actually automate posts. So something that you made, let's say on a Facebook page, can be automated to a different account there. Instagram, I find kind of highest engagement. Social platforms, two, particularly if you're involved with tech, that I'd focus on would be Hacker News and Reddit. I did want to make a note for influencer outreach. I remember my own company, one of the things that changed the trajectory was we basically looked to create these free resources, and we would send out emails to these very influential bloggers and ask if they would want to share or they'd want to write an article about this. And this is actually a very specific case. And it's a bit of a longer email, but again, I'm happy to share this presentation after. And it was to a venture capitalist named Brad Feld. He's one of the most popular bloggers within the technology community. And I sent him this email just saying, hey, I would love for you to take a look at this free resource. And he responded, said, really good stuff, can I blog about it? And even today, this is actually one of the largest drivers of new visits and traffic to us. So again, can't kind of overestimate. And actually, one of the great things about this is you begin to kind of build a relationship. The other day, I exchanged an email from him, and it had been a few years. But again, it's a way that you could kind of use these different influencers to grow your identity online. And the reason why I say identity and why it is important is because your goal ultimately, on a personal level and a company level, isn't just short term. It isn't just, hey, how can I bring in more visitors or drive a new revenue the next month or two? Your goal over the long term for building your identity online is actually to own share of mind in a really specific space. So what you do want is when the New York Times is looking to do an article on a specific area, for them to reach out to you, even if you don't proactively do so. And the reason why I think an example of an organization that's done a great job about this is ATECH, in that, ATECH, this is an example on the Next Web. They're going to be included in these articles when people are talking about innovation and technology in Aruba, even if they don't contact other people, because they own share of mind for that specific space. And each of you, whether you're starting a fashion company, whether you're in government, whether it's in tourism, your ultimate goal in building your identity is to own share of mind in those specific spaces. Couple of things just for the future to keep in mind, especially as a lot of these large organizations, particularly in media, continue with financial challenges, they are going to be proactively looking for individuals such as yourself to contribute articles. And that could be ones like Forbes, that could be ones like TechCrunch, et cetera. And it's a really big opportunity for each of you to use. I'd say one thing to keep in mind, particularly with media, is going back 15, 20 years, media was all about contacting journalists. And about 15 years ago, it moved to being about contacting journalists and bloggers. And to me, in the future, it's going to be about journalists, bloggers, and gatekeepers. So you can imagine it's going to be just as important for you to contact, let's say, a producer at YouTube or et cetera, or at Product Hunt, a moderator there, than it would be to contact a traditional journalist. I would recommend, when you think about this work on identity, it's not just about marketing. I think ultimately, the reputation is ultimately what the only thing all of us really has. So really protect it. And the last note is anyone interested in moving from internet famous to mainstream, I recommend focusing on images and video. These are much more powerful mediums than just pure text. So something to keep in mind. So last note, and again, I'm actually have to come to an end. So my team now is about 80 people, and we actually have to build out our own marketing team, even within that. And this past year, this team basically looked to create kind of a strategy for that. And I wanted to share this with the entire team. It'll be easier actually to send the PowerPoint after, but anyone who wants it can kind of get a sense of like, how do we create these goals? How do we structure this, whether it's using social media, et cetera? What are the specific kind of ideas there? Whether it's with advertisements, email, et cetera. And the idea is that each of you can use it as a template for all of your own organizations, again, on a personal level and also on a company-wide as well. Thank you so much for ATECH and the team for being here. It's fantastic to be in Aruba.
Thank you.